This is a story I haven't thought about in years, and maybe that's for the best. Back when I was younger, my friends and I had a bad habit of exploring places we shouldn't. We grew up in Pennsylvania, and there were plenty of old, abandoned buildings scattered across the back roads to keep us entertained. Factories, hospitals, houses, you name it, we went there. Most of them were just piles of rot and rust, but every once in a while we'd stumble across something different, something that felt wrong. That's exactly what happened the night we decided to check out the Ridgeview Middle School. It was about a 40-minute drive from our town, and it had been shut down since the early 90s after a fire broke out in the gym. There were tons of photos online, and it looked incredible. Long, dark hallways, graffiti everywhere, desks still in place, a perfect spot for urban explorers. There were 4 of us that night: me, Jake, Leo, and Brandon. Jake and I were into graffiti, so we packed a couple of cans of spray paint and flashlights that could blind a bear. We also brought a few leftover fireworks from the 4th of July, because why not? Leo was driving that night. He parked a few blocks away from the school, and we walked the rest of the distance under the orange glow of broken streetlights. The chain-link fence surrounding the school had already been cut open, like someone was waiting for us to come. We slipped through and made our way toward the main entrance. The school was massive, much bigger than we expected. Every window was shattered, and the smell of mildew hit us as soon as we pushed the door open. The halls were a mess of fallen ceiling tiles and broken lockers. Graffiti covered almost every inch of wall, and bits of insulation hung from above like cobwebs. We started down one of the main corridors, flashlights flicking across the decayed classrooms. The silence was the kind that presses on your ears. You could hear your own heartbeat. We did a full loop through the basement first. The air was heavier down there. Mold, rust, and something else. In one of the boiler rooms, we found a massive red pentagram painted across the floor, still wet and dripping. Jake laughed it off, said it was probably just other explorers messing around. But I noticed his hand shaking when he turned off his light. After that, we went back upstairs. One of the old classrooms still had a white wall clean enough to paint on. Jake and I started tagging, while Leo and Brandon said they'd try to find the roof entrance. We split up. A few minutes later, I heard Jake yell from behind me. He was pissed. He thought I'd stolen his backpack, the one with all the paint cans in it. I hadn't even moved. We searched the room. Nothing. The bag was gone. We decided to find the others, assuming maybe Brandon took it as a prank. We climbed a few flights of stairs until we reached the top floor. While walking down the hall, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. A door was slightly open, and through the crack, I could see another pentagram, just like the one in the basement. But this one was fresh, still dripping. And sitting in the corner of the room was Jake's missing backpack. Jake stepped beside me, stared at it, and muttered, "Okay, whoever's screwing with us, this isn't funny anymore." He grabbed the bag, and we turned to leave. That's when we heard running. Heavy footsteps from the direction we'd just come from. It was Leo and Brandon sprinting full speed down the hall, shouting for us to move. We didn't ask questions. We just ran. When we finally caught our breath a few corridors later, Leo told us they'd walked into one of the classrooms downstairs and found 3 people wearing dark cloaks sitting in a circle on the floor. They weren't doing anything, just sitting there with candles and what looked like glass marbles spread out in front of them. The moment they saw Leo and Brandon, they started chasing them. We tried to find our way back to the exit, but the school was a maze. Every corner looked the same, and the only sound was our breathing, and something else. A low hissing noise. It echoed down the hallway ahead of us, sharp and deliberate, like someone trying to mimic a cat. Then, from the darkness, a man's voice said clearly, "I should have cut you when I had the chance." We didn't wait to see who it was. We ran. The sound of boots slammed against the tile behind us, along with voices yelling threats. I was certain we weren't getting out. But somehow, Leo found the right turn, and the broken front doors came into view. We bolted outside, jumped the fence, and didn't stop running until we reached the car. No one spoke on the drive home. Later that night, we talked about it again, trying to make sense of what happened. Jake thought it was just some deranged squatters playing games. Brandon believed it was a cult. Me? I kept thinking about the dripping pentagram and the way the paint looked fresh, like it had been done just minutes before we got there. I never went back to Ridgeview, but sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about that voice and the way it sounded like it was right behind me.
This happened about 3 years ago, when I was living alone in Northern Oregon. I had just gone through a rough breakup and wanted a change of scenery, so I found a small rental house just outside of town, far enough to be quiet, but close enough that I could still get to work without too much driving. It was a cozy place, 1 bedroom, a small living room, and a back deck that faced a line of old cedar trees. The kind of house that felt peaceful during the day, but just a little too quiet once the sun went down. I worked late most nights at a warehouse about 20 minutes away, so I usually got home around 10. My routine was simple: take a shower, order dinner, and unwind with a movie before bed. One night in early November, it was raining pretty hard. I remember because the wind kept whistling through the gaps in the old window frames. I had just gotten home and ordered a pizza from a place in town I'd used plenty of times before. Maybe half an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Not the usual ring of the bell, just 2 dull knocks. I looked through the peephole and saw a man standing there holding what looked like a pizza box under his arm. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just a dark jacket and a cap pulled low. That struck me as odd, because the place I ordered from usually had drivers in red polos with the restaurant's logo. I asked through the door, "Who's it for?" He paused, then said my name, but the way he said it made me hesitate, like he'd only read it once and wasn't quite sure of the pronunciation. Something about his tone didn't sit right with me, so I said, "Just leave it on the porch, thanks." He didn't move. He just stood there for a few seconds before saying, "You need to sign for it." That didn't make any sense. Who signs for pizza? I told him again to leave it, or I wasn't opening the door. He didn't argue, but I could see his jaw tighten under the porch light before he slowly turned and walked off toward the street. A few minutes later, I called the pizza place just to be sure. The woman on the phone said my order was still in the oven. Nobody had been sent out yet. That's when my stomach dropped. Whoever had just been at my door knew my name and address, but had nothing to do with the restaurant. I ended up calling the sheriff's office to report it. They said they'd send a car through the area, but there wasn't much they could do unless the person came back. I tried to shake it off, but my nerves were shot. I double-checked all the locks and closed every curtain in the house. The real delivery showed up about 20 minutes later. This time it was the usual driver I recognized. I tipped him extra and mentioned what had happened. He got this uneasy look and said he'd heard about someone posing as a driver in nearby neighborhoods. That night I couldn't sleep. I left the TV on just for the noise. Around midnight, I heard something from the back of the house, a faint tapping sound like metal brushing against glass. It came from the kitchen window. I crept over and peeked through the side curtain. At first, I didn't see anything. Then the security light outside flicked on, and I caught a glimpse of a figure darting away into the tree line, the same dark jacket and cap. I called 911 right away. Deputies showed up about 15 minutes later and searched the area, but he was gone. They found boot prints in the mud beneath the kitchen window and a single pry mark near the frame. One of them told me I probably scared him off when the light came on. They took my statement and said they'd keep an eye on the area. I didn't stay there much longer after that. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from a deputy I'd spoken to before. He told me they'd arrested someone in connection with a string of attempted break-ins. Apparently, the guy had been using delivery bags and uniforms to trick people into opening their doors. When they searched his car, they found a list of addresses. Mine was on it. I don't know how he got it, and honestly, I don't want to know. I moved out a month later and hadn't ordered food delivery since. Don't forget to subscribe for more scary stories. Thank you for watching.